The Harvard President Claudine Gay has resigned from her position over the allegations of plagiarism and backlash over her congressional testimony about antisemitism on the campus. She came under pressure to resign from Harvard's Jewish community and some members of the Congress over her comments at the recent congressional hearing. The incident is amongst a slew of events that have happened in the course of a couple of months, where during the congressional hearings, a number of elite Ivy League presidents have had to backtrack on their previous support to anti-Semitism in their campuses. From MIT, the University of Pennsylvania, Harvard, Cornell, how the mighty have fallen. They have all come under the scrutiny for practicing and allowing anti-Semitism sentiment to grow on their campuses. This brings me to the question. It is surely not fair for educational institutions to isolate themselves from the world affairs and have an opinion on them. But what happens when these opinions are shaped and funded by the lobbyists who, for their own interests, seek to build a narrative that propagates Islamist fundamentalism and terrorism? Whether it is the support for anti-Semitism or targeting Hindutva by portraying it as an radical ideology, these institutions need to be exposed for what they truly are. They have fallen from their lofty statures and lost their credibility. Time for the world to know what they actually are. Let's start my conversation with Ambassador Suresh Goyal. Now, Ambassador, this discussion has been going on for several months now, ever since the Israeli war on Hamas took place. We saw a number of students in these Ivy Leagues, in Cornell, in MIT, Pennsylvania, Harvard, coming out and writing these open letters. Now, there was this environment of wokeism, the cancel culture that these students and even their professors and presidents propagate, as has been witnessed in these congressional hearings that have been taking place, which have pulled up these institutions, these colleges, these universities. My question being, while we talk about the JNU or Jamia Millia Islamia or Osmania University back here in India, or we talk about these Ivy Leagues, there is a set pattern to the events that take place and why they take place.
Megha, that's a very difficult question you have put to me, and every time I do it, I'm going to take a view which many people may not like it, some people may like it, but it is my view. And the good thing about NewsX is that it does give voice to even different points of view, whether it agrees with the others or not. Now, you said whether this kind of a phenomenon, there is some kind of a pattern to it or not. There is a pattern here. If there are 3 Ivy League colleges in the USA who have given some kind of a view, there are many other colleges in Israel, there are many other academic institutions in India, and many other academic institutions in other world which have given a different point of view. But there are demonstrations taking place in the USA against what is happening in Gaza, not just in the universities. That taking place in the Times Square in New York, that taking place in London, all over Europe, even though Europe electorally is becoming more rightist than before, despite the kind of a political feeling in Europe and in the USA. And in the USA, Trump seems to be coming back again politically. But despite all that, people are demonstrating on the roads against what is happening in Gaza. If it is not happening in India, maybe because we have a much more strict regime and a government and a politically correct government. I'm putting politically correct quote within quotes, which does not allow that kind of a thing to happen because we have good relations with Israel. Fine, that happens. I'm not coming to the issue on hand here. I come from Delhi University. I graduated in 1975 from my post-graduation. And I still remember that in university at that time, the students were at liberty to take a point of view against the establishment. There was no restrictions that we could not speak. And in fact, at one time, there was a demonstration, and the Vice Chancellor called the police. Vice Chancellor called the police and the student community. And Arun Jaitley at that time, by the way, was the president of the NewsX. We were so angry with the Vice Chancellor as to why he had called the police into an educational institution when students were only basically giving expression to where they differed with the government. Now, coming to Harvard, UPenn, and the other universities, and MIT, I think what happened there is very, very unfortunate. There was no need for any of the presidents of the universities to get involved in a controversy of this kind. At campus, the student community, they may feel either way, but it becomes incumbent on the president of the university to not allow a partisan view to grow. It should remain non-partisan. Therefore, if anti-Semitism, so to say, that is a view against what is happening in Gaza, turned into a kind of a view against Jews per se, that should not have been allowed. Yeah. And if a view become, all other views should have been given the expression. But rather than the president of Harvard saying that till it does not become a conduct, basically saying till the views remain views and does not actually change into action, they should be allowed, fine. But I think mature wisdom and rectitude, etc., come into play, and she could have played it better, really. Okay. And I think she, after the congressional hearing, that she could have dealt with the issue in a much better fashion. But I think the situation of the president is very unfortunate.
Yeah, but I'm going to again quote by quote just read out during these congressional hearings what were the questions that were posed to these presidents of these Ivy League universities. And you rightly mentioned there was this question about these presidents being asked whether calling for genocide of Jews would violate each university's code of conduct, to which these individuals responded by saying if the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment. And you rightly mentioned that if the sentiment of genocide of Jews turns into actions, like there is actually a killing of the Jew or beating up of a Jew on the campus, is when the university is going to take action against that particular student or the perpetrator of that crime. But the very question, anti-Semitism is terrorism, it's genocide. Whether it is being practiced or being propagated or opinions are being aired about it is completely wrong. It's black and white. There is no gray area to it.
Anti-Semitism, terrorism, and genocide. Anti-Semitism is not correct, but it is not defined internationally as terrorism or genocide. And I'm saying that basically because as a diplomat, I would like to use correct lexicon. That's all.
Okay. Professor Madhav Nalapat, when there are millions and millions of Jews that have been killed in the history of the world before the World War I, there are exodus that has happened of the Jews who had to be then given a territory of land in the Middle East to call their home. Does this not amount to terrorism? Does this not amount to genocide? And can we draw a clear distinction and a black and white situation that propagation, shouting death to Jews, kill the Jews, is tantamount to supporting the terrorist ideology of the Hamas, of the Hezbollah, of ISI, of the Pakistani government, of the Turkish government, of all these presidents that come out talking about anti-Semitism?
Megha, you're perfectly right. And I remember going to Kashmir back in 1990, 91, etc. and hearing chanting of mobs against the Kashmiri Pandits. And we know what happened in Kashmir. And we know the killing and the murder and the rape and and the unspeakable horrors that were visited upon the Pandit community as well as moderate other elements of Kashmiri society. Incitement to violence is certainly something that cannot be permissible anywhere in a country. You're talking explicitly of genocide of the Jewish people. The Jewish people have experienced genocide, horrible genocide. Just in the previous century, there was a person called Adolf Hitler who made a career out of propagating genocide of the Jews. And are you telling me that, as a consequence, Hitler himself, I don't believe Hitler himself would have actually actively, killed a single Jew. He had others do that for him until Hitler himself took up a knife or a gun or whatever and killed a Jew. There was nothing wrong in him saying the Jewish people needed to be wiped out. Frankly, that's a very extreme point of view. I think incitement to genocide is wrong. Incitement to violence is wrong. And because I've seen situations where this incitement leads to violence and leads to death. And let's not forget, Jewish students have been singled out. Not just Jewish students, Indian students who have voiced support for Israel have been singled out. They have been abused. They have been verbally abused. They have been sometimes physically attacked. Simply for saying that Israel has a perfect right to basically fight against a terror organization that conducted an act of unspeakable horror against Israeli citizens, and if I may say so, citizens of other countries as well, on October 7 last year. So, quite frankly, but Mega, I'm not surprised. Mr. Panun is wandering around the streets of Canada, United States, UK, God knows where, because Mr. Panun is only inciting violence. He's not himself participating in violence. Mr. Panun is not taking up a gun. He's not taking up a stick or something. He's not clubbing somebody to death. He's not shooting somebody. So Panun is fine. Why should we do anything against Panun? Panun is actively supporting terror groups. He's a facilitator. He's a fundraiser. And he has been celebrating acts of terror. But no, Panun is a wonderful chap. Just as that other gentleman in Canada who fell a victim to intra-gang violence because he was very active in the narcotics trade.
Yeah.
That's a pretty violent trade. Well, yeah, the same argument has been made. Freedom of speech. That's what the Harvard president made. And frankly, there is no question that her resignation was called for because certain behavior is completely out of order. And if I may point out, the behavior of those who basically call for violence, terrorism, incitement against India, a huge democracy. These are also similar kind of people, and they need to be called out. So it's not just the Harvard president, the president of the United States, the prime minister of the United Kingdom, the chancellor of Germany, various other, and not to mention Mr. Justin Trudeau, who has now become an accessory, in my view, to terrorism and to extremism. These people need to be called out, and if they continue to condone this kind of behavior on the part of the Panuns and the others, then I think they also need to quit.
Okay. Rashmi, do you also see double standards in America and the West and Europe when it comes to the Trump indictment that happened, him being removed from fighting the primary polls in Colorado and now Miami, and talking about how he incited mobs, he incited people on social media to then attack the Capitol Hill and cause destruction of property and of life on Capitol Hill, versus what has happened on the campuses of these Ivy Leagues, and a simple resignation. It's not even a resignation that has been asked. They've come out, quote unquote, voluntarily come out and resign from their positions. Shouldn't there be stronger action taken against them?
Well, Megha, in my opinion, propaganda is definitely prerequisite to genocide, and that was the case during the Holocaust. Goebbels, he was the chief propaganda officer for Hitler, and for years they pushed anti-Semitic material to the German people. And when the Holocaust itself happened, many well-meaning people just looked away because it was normalized in their minds that the Jews had to be persecuted. Similar thing is happening currently, and unfortunately, campuses which are supposed to be safe learning spaces have turned into battlegrounds for this kind of propaganda, and that is very concerning because a university mega needs to be one place where all students feel safe. And it is the duty, it's the moral responsibility and also legislative responsibility for a university to play the role of a guardian. So they have that role to every student. They are guardians of their students. So they cannot have their own students put in harm's way just because one section of the community believes that the others don't have an agency. So that kind of, sentiment cannot be allowed to fester to an extent that they start questioning the existence and the legitimacy of another part of the student community. I think these are places where a line needs to be drawn.
Right.
Unfortunately, we see is double standards. Like we saw double standards in Trump's indictment. The same thing is seen, even abroad when it comes to different cases. If the Jews are being persecuted, if Hindu students are being persecuted, blind eye, it's freedom of speech. But if the same thing is done to, say, a Muslim students, or students of any other community, then there will be so much furor and so much uproar and so much, sort of debate and discussion, and so much punishment will be, a lot of punishment will be expected because it's discrimination and it is, an active threat to life of a student. And, it's the fiduciary role of the university to, kind of discharge a guardian sort of a position as a guardian. So all of that will come in. But when it's all, convenience, it's a matter of convenience. And that's what justice has been reduced to in our world.
I absolutely agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. But also,
innocent people are becoming cannon fodder.
Yeah, Professor Nalapat also mentioned that this is, widespread bias, prejudice that is shown against India. He's given these right examples of our consulates and high commissions and high commissioners and ambassadors being attacked, and all in the open. And these are just being sidelined and said that, these are protests, this is freedom of speech. We talk about Pannu, like he rightfully mentioned. So this is a larger sinister plot at play. And while these individuals and state actors might want to deny it, it's out there, exposed in front of the world to see. Unfortunately, are we able to do something about it? Adit Kothari, this question to you. Now, in our account, in whatever is possible, on our accord, are coming out and saying that this Pannu is a terrorist. We have put him on our designated terrorist list. The MHA has come out with this list. There is this Khalistani terrorist, Landa, who has now come under the NIA scrutiny. There is another individual who's come out in the MHA list calling him a terrorist. But is really even an iota of doubt left in our minds that Canada or North America are really going to do anything about it?
Megha, neither Canada nor the United Kingdom or Australia are going to be doing anything about this. I mean, if you look at the modus operandi in general, they have only ended up platforming, these feral individuals more and more. Over the course of the last few years, if we see, you mentioned the attack on the Indian High Commissioner, for example. That was an absolute act of barbarity. It was an act of criminality. And look at the way the United Kingdom essentially handled that particular situation. The Khalistani extremists who did the attack on Vikram Doraiswamy were absolutely let go scot-free. There were no charges pressed on them, and it was given a garb of freedom of speech and expression. Now, just imagine if this was a US ambassador in United Kingdom who was being heckled down by protesters from somewhere else. Can you imagine the kind of uproar we would have seen in the Western media? We didn't see that kind of uproar in either the West media or the Indian media. So there is definitely that sense of duplicity. But what we need to be cognizant of it is also that our inabilities to tackle this issue has been profound. And it's just not, with the previous dispensations of the governments, even this government has not taken this issue very seriously. This year there are going to be more than 2 million Indian students who are going to be spending over 30 billion US dollars across the planet on education. And all of these universities are, the social sciences divisions in most of these universities are indulging in very, very vicious Indophobia and Hindumism. And this is something which has not been taken very strongly by either the MEA or the Ministry of Education. So there needs to be checks and balances, which needs to be put in place to ensure that, we are not spending our own monies for our own vilification and denigration.
Okay.
Megha.
Okay. Ambassador Goyal, coming back to you, and again, I'm drawing parallels to the activities, protests, ideological differences that can be seen in various institutions, whether it is the Ivy Leagues in America or it is the prestigious universities in Delhi. We talk about JNU, Jamia Millia, and so on and so forth. And I bring to fore this one incident that has taken place some years ago about how there was propagation and support that had been shown to a terrorist, Afzal Guru, who was the mastermind of the 2001 Parliament attack. He was being given a platform, so some sort of a revolutionary, and asked to hold a lecture in the institute. There were strict UAPA laws that were imposed. There were arrests that were made. Now, one thing is to come up and speak about opposing ideologies, and everybody would entertain it and of course encourage it as well. But on the other side, when there is support, strong adherence and propagation that will allow for incitement, not just allow for incitement, but coming out in strong support of a terrorist, it's crossing a line to beyond.
Megha, you are answering many of the questions which you are posing to me in your own way, and therefore making it more difficult for me to really give my own point of view. I will tell you why. When you hear a view like this, you try and find margins and the spaces within which you can respond. But first of all, I would really like to compliment, and I'm serious about this, because there are very few channels who really take this kind of a debate on the ideological issues, and it is very important. Now, coming to the question that you posed, my counter question would be, should political dissent or ideological dissent be conflated with conformism? Should we say that everybody has to think along the same lines to basically be a good part of the society? Or are we saying that the universities are not the place for people to take political views? Because I'm doing these mock interviews for the UPSC civil services these days, and the first criterion that we really look for is whether he's a thinking candidate or not, or he's just a candidate who has read a few books and he's regurgitating whatever. Therefore, my counter question really here is, there has to be space in every society for political dissent.
Okay.
There has to be space for different opinions.
Okay.
However, these dissent and these different opinions and non-conformism should not be conflated with any tendency for violence and any tendency for physical, I use the word violence already. And from that point of view, it's a very, very difficult cakewalk when the law-making authorities or legal authorities will have to determine where the boundaries have been crossed. It's not an easy call to make. But till the boundary has been crossed, I think the space has to be given to different views to come into open. Otherwise, you will have a phenomenon that people who have different views, they will keep them inside, and suddenly there will be like a earthquake. What do you call those? You burst out with the lava coming out really because you have not been able to come to the open.
Okay.
And that's a democracy.
Okay.
And it's a democracy because we can all give our different opinions.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Professor Nalapat, when we talk about ideological dissent and at the same breath speak about support for terrorism, because when you're chanting slogans, death to the Jews, when you're chanting slogans of supporting genocide of the Jews, it's not a fine line. It is actually two different things. Ideological dissent is you talk about, listen, I am of the opinion that what Trump and what the Republican Party stands for, whether it is about abortion, whether it is about the blacks' rights, is something that is a question of contemplation, a question of debate, a question of discussion. But, and I would like to give you an example. Suppose the people who come out in support of the Hamas and calling them Hamas fighters and calling them about fighting for the freedom of the Palestinians versus an individual who goes about carrying a gun and killing 500 people, 50 people, goes to a school, goes to a concert and kills them. He also has a mindset. He also has a reason to do it. He goes about saying, this is the ideology I follow and that's exactly why I killed that person. Now, how far are you going to go and defend a particular ideology? And is this really a matter of ideology, but a matter of a black and white, right and wrong?
Megha, we were told about Joseph Goebbels, and may I point out that 20% of the population of Israel is Palestinian. And may I point out that look at the quote-unquote freedoms enjoyed by Palestinians in Hamas. Nothing. If you speak against Hamas, you are put to death. You are tortured. And you have no freedoms whatsoever. And whereas in Israel, you can be a member of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, you have the right of education, free education, other healthcare and other services, and the kind of rights. You please contrast the rights of the Palestinian in Gaza, which is ruled by a terrorist entity, Hamas. Let's not kid ourselves. It's not an ideology. It is an extremist, vicious kind of extremist manifestation. And you look at the rights enjoyed by Palestinians in Israel. Look at India. Now, you have a huge narrative. You look at the UK papers these days. My God, the Daily Telegraph and the Guardian and every other paper, the Times. Oh my God, India. Minorities are being killed off rapidly, just killed. Soon there'll be no minority left. And what's happened? You have a situation where they're completely ignoring the fact that the actual countries where minorities have been killed off, Afghanistan and Pakistan, for example, are being given a free ride. Nobody talks about them. None of these editorial writers. In India, the minority population has crossed to 230 million. I'm delighted by that because several of the minorities are very, very productive citizens in the field of education, the field of healthcare, the field of science. They are tremendously productive citizens. But this is a complete la-la land, which with this kind of narrative is leading us into. And the kind of hatred for Hindus, as has correctly been said, by Mr. Kothari, the Hindus are genocidal maniacs. All they do is wake up in the morning and want to kill the Christians and Muslims. For heaven's sake. Mm-hmm. Where is that happening? It is happening. It's happening next door in Pakistan. It's happening in Afghanistan. Nobody talks about that. And you'll be surprised. Many of the people who are talking about these horrible things happening in India that don't happen are from Pakistan. And many of them are the children of army officers and others who are active facilitators of this genocide. So right. Frankly, this is la-la land. And the Harvard president who resigned, the other presidents, the professors, the teachers, others who basically allow this la-la land to continue, they are creating the conditions, quite frankly, for a new period of vicious kind of extremism. And it's very important to understand hate speech is not freedom of speech.
Okay.
Incitement to violence is not freedom of speech. These are crimes against humanity and crimes that need to be immediately tackled, as they were in the case of these resignations. I do believe very senior people in these countries need to think about resigning, because they have been as complicit in this kind of creation of a La La Land in reverse narrative.
Right.
And Ms. Samant will tell you exactly what that narrative is.
Okay, all right. So I'm out of time, but I thank all of you for joining me on the telecast. I'll leave the discussion with this thought that it's not La La Land that has been created by these individuals, entities, institutions, foundations, and even the governments that are governing the country at the moment, but it is a well thought out plan that is funded by the lobbyists for their vested interests that are functioning in these Ivy Leagues, that are functioning within the governments, and allowing for narratives to be built, allowing for propagation of these ideologies to happen. So on one hand, if there are congressional hearings and there are Republicans and Democrats, and there is a bipartisan support to the acts of antisemitism that is occurring out of these colleges and universities, at the same time, you see Kamala Harris coming out and adopting a resolution in support of the Islamophobia that is spreading in United States of America. So it's a food for thought, a lot of things to ponder about, and also the question that needs to be raised about the credibility or the lack of it when the Ivy Leagues are in question. And are people finally coming to face with it and understanding the larger schemes of things in which these institutions function. Thanks for watching.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.